Hi, welcome to the Unsolved, the channel that talks about stories that became mysteries. If you are new to the channel, thank you for stopping by and subscribe. If you're already a subscriber, thank you, and don't forget to hit the like button. Okay, let's get started. Today we are going to talk about Charles Lindbergh and the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. So it's a very old story, but definitely worth retelling. And so let's get started. Charles Lindbergh was considered an American hero. He was also considered pioneer of flight. He was the very first pilot to do a nonstop flight from New York City to Paris in about 33 hours. He made it. He did it solo. He went without a parachute just to save room for gas. And, he just did the whole thing and went for it and made it. And once he got to Paris, he was greeted with hundreds and thousands of people that cheered him on. And here in America, in New York, people were also cheering him on. This was a very, very big success, very big deal. And that just kind of catapulted him into this whirlwind of fame. And, just people loved him and just considered him again like an American hero. So his background, he's of German descent. Let's put a pin in that. But he started flying airplanes in the military. He was a pilot. He dropped out of high school. Even though he did drop out of high school, he was still considered very intelligent. He was an author, an inventor, and just did major things that kind of solidified his heroism here in America. So yeah, moving along in the story, I guess that flight took place in the late 1920s. And shortly thereafter, he met his wife and they got married and had a baby and decided to kind of get out of the limelight a little bit and built this huge home in New Jersey, maybe about an hour from Manhattan, and decided that's where they wanted to raise their family. The estate had 600 acres and was filled with all different types of staff, a butler, maids, a nanny. They had a baby, Charles Lindbergh, named Charlie. And Charles Jr. was not quite 2 years old when he was kidnapped from his bedroom. And there was a lot of mystery surrounding his disappearance. But let me back up a little bit and dig a little bit deeper into his father, Charles Lindbergh. I mentioned earlier that he was of German descent and he was a very big sympathizer of Hitler, and he was just very fascinated with eugenics and just the dominant race and those types of narratives. So his child was unfortunately diagnosed with rickets. He had a severe deficiency in vitamin D. So much so, they gave him a lot of supplements, had him sleep under like a sun lamp and, to try to reverse some of that. And unfortunately, his son, had trouble standing, had trouble walking. His feet were kind of curled in. He had a big head. The doctors considered him like a square head. And I don't know why I'm giggling about that, because it's not funny, but he just had trouble. He was not quite 20 months old, not quite two, but he was huge, the size of maybe a 4-year-old. So In Lindbergh's mind, he wanted his genes to be pristine. Like he wanted his children, his wife, everyone to be, anybody with his last name, he wanted them to be of superior genes and had no room for any type of deformity or any type of disorders or diseases or any of that. So there was some conspiracy there, that kind of led folks to believe that perhaps Lindbergh was behind the kidnapping of his own son. Anyway, so fast forward, the baby was kidnapped, and a few months later, they found his body, decomposing body, and so of course they started accusing and had a few not witnesses, a few suspects, and one of the suspects was the nanny, of course. She ended up committing suicide. There was a housekeeper. There was Anne Morrow Lindbergh, which was Lindbergh's wife. Her sister, I guess, had some type of mental disorder, and I think tried to kidnap the baby at one point, and so they felt she was a suspect, and I think they ruled her out eventually. But it came down to this gentleman, Bruno Hauptmann, and he was charged and tried and convicted and actually sentenced to death. But even until his death, he maintained his innocence. Like him and his wife were like, "This we didn't do. He didn't do this." He was even offered the equivalent of $1 million today for his wife that was in destitute when he was in prison. She can have this money, just confess, just sign this confession. He still wouldn't do it because he didn't commit the crime. He didn't want to confess because he didn't feel he had anything to confess for. We'll put it that way. So, but they found the gentleman. He was at a gas station. He paid with a $10 bill that had like a gold stamp back in the day. I guess that's how the money looked. And I guess they traced it back and said it was some of the ransom money. And so, they felt like, and then they found, I think they went to his home and they found like $20,000. And again, this is early 1930s. So that's a lot of money today. So that's definitely a ton of money back then to make you look very suspicious. And then they said that he had quit his job the day the ransom was paid or something. So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence that they felt was pretty strong, and they were, the authorities were under high pressure to capture someone and convict somebody of this crime. And I might mention that Charles Lindbergh was in charge of the whole investigation. Like he was being very micromanagey towards everybody. The cops, I don't even know how they even allowed this, but I guess with his social status and his fame and considered American hero, it was considered the crime of the century. So I guess they had just allowed it and just kind of went with it, and which is suspicious, for him to just be so heavily involved in everything. And a lot of people felt that Bruno, the gentleman that was convicted and sentenced to death, was framed. They found there was a makeshift ladder near the child's bedroom, and they had experts come in and, they tested the wood. They went everywhere trying to match the wood, the pieces, and they ended up finding one of the wood planks in this dude Bruno's attic or something, and said, okay, haha, this is our smoking gun. And so that's how he ended up being charged. But really, it's still a mystery because a lot of things just didn't add up. A lot of things didn't add up. Not only the fact that Mr. Lindbergh was in charge of the entire investigation. Mr. Lindbergh himself was kind of a creep and kind of a shady character to begin with. They considered him like a practical joker, but his practical jokes were not jokes. They were just kind of very dark. For instance, he already had played a joke on his wife and the whole staff of the house that the baby had been kidnapped. He actually took the child and put it in a closet, and then, you know, was going around the house. Oh, somebody, the baby's kidnapped. Somebody took our baby. And of course, everybody's panicking. The poor wife was just like beside herself, and he just had the baby in the closet. Like, it's those kind of jokes. Oh, and when he was in the military, his roommate, they would always have like a water pitcher, sitting around near their bed, and it was hardly ever full because they would during the night or whatever, they would drink some and what have you. And one day Charles Lindbergh filled it up with gasoline, and when the roommate woke up and was thirsty, he was like, oh, it's full, you can have some, and just watched him take this big drink of it. And by the time I guess the roommate smelled it, and he had already had like a mouthful of it and was like convulsing and gagging and pretty much almost died. And he didn't do, Charles Lindbergh just kind of like sat back and just thought it was like a funny joke. And it's like, those type of pranks you're dark. That's not a prank. That's not funny. So, he just was not. And I guess as time went on, people started to realize he's not really a hero at all. He went on this whole campaign, World War II kind of rolled around, and again, he was a heavy supporter of Hitler. He hated Roosevelt. He, went on this campaign since he had like an audience. He had people that would listen to him when he went on tour and gave speeches and stuff. But his speeches kind of became more not heroic. They were more, anti-American, he was just a Nazi supporter and a racist. I'm just going to say it, okay? And he just wasn't a good guy. And he actually philandered on his wife. He had 5 different children. I mean, he had more children with his wife as time went on, but I think 13 children total. But he had 5 children with 3 different baby mamas, not including his wife. These were 3 additional women that we know of, and had 5 different children with those 3 women. And that, he just really had a fall from grace. He just didn't live up to his heroic name that he started with. And it's crazy. He ended up dying in the 70s, I believe, in Hawaii. And, as he got older, I think he started realizing like just some of the terrible things that he had done and said, and kind of tried to turn it around there at the last minute. Became an environmentalist, I believe, an environmentalist and an activist for that, and was buried in Hawaii, kind of a natural grave, no jewelry, no shoes, just white cloth, and just wanted to become the earth, because he really kind of transformed into that environmentalist activist. And so that's kind of like how he ended. But cray. Yes, definitely a mystery. I honestly do feel like the gentleman that was charged with this crime was framed. I know there was heavy evidence, but when you have a man that could have possibly been the person that planned and staged the whole kidnapping and murder, and some even say that it was a prank gone wrong, because the ladder was built a little bit too short for the window, like it wasn't tall enough to reach the window. So there is a theory that Charles Lindbergh himself was trying to do one of his pranks again and went into the window, but on the way back out, since there was like this gap in a distance between the window and the ladder, accidentally dropped the child, dropped his baby, and the baby died, because the baby did die of a severe head wound. So some feel like maybe that's what happened. Then he just had to go with it. He didn't want to run the risk of ruining his name, so he just really went with the whole story, and just kind of snowballed. So what do you think? Have you heard this story before? And do you have theories? Leave comments if you do. And that's it. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to say today. That's all I got. Thank you. Bye.